Hello again, everyone. Another message, this one off of YouTube. Dear Ollie, firstly, I hope you get your daughter back soon. I know what that pain feels like. Secondly, thank you for sharing your truth. Lastly, keep doing what you're doing with your channel, please. I believe that you cold read, so with that, please advise viewers to move children out of earshot if you decide to respond via video. Thank you. So I don't know what's coming up. I haven't read this, but if there's children, I guess she feels it would be bad. Or I'm assuming it's a woman. I don't even know, to be honest with you. I have no money to donate right now, but I wish I did and one day hope to. I just got here and I am barely hanging on, exhausted and trying to survive in the middle of the desert in a broken down motorhome with a roof leak trying to swim out of this vomit. Like narcissism survivor said, anything is better than being abused. About 6 months ago, again, I almost killed myself, not wanting to die, hence not able to hear the despair any longer. I completely understand Zeller's note. The mother of my grandchildren with my eldest son has given me new hope, and she doesn't even know it. This community is my therapy, and I am grateful. I have been writing this for several days now. It's very difficult and has brought me to my knees. You are the very first person that is about to know a piece of my details, of the details of my truth. I don't even know where to begin. I am writing you because I want to do the right thing. A little background, and I shall try to make this as brief as possible. My younger sister and I grew up with a loving, hardworking father and an abusive stay-at-home birth giver who never worked and still doesn't to this day, and whom I believe to be a histrionic narcissist. I was 12 and my sister was 9 when Daddy died. 3 months after we lost our father, our birth giver picked up a strange male at the beach and moved him in. Shortly thereafter, he tried to molest me, and the new rule was we were not allowed to be in the house if this child molester was at the house when she was not home. The birth giver's vagina was more important than taking care of us and keeping us safe, but I didn't know that at the time. My sister found refuge with her best friend and her family, thank goodness. I was scooped up by a 24-year-old predator and also didn't know that at the time. That's disgusting. Your mother's a disgusting individual. So she knew he was trying to molest you, and the only rule, she didn't throw him out, get you away. She's like, oh, just don't be in the house at the same time. You're right, and you're right. Your mother's vagina comes before all else. He bought me food and pretended to care until he lured me inside the house and drugged me, then raped me. It was a systematic process. He would go from telling me that your mother doesn't care about you, but I do, and all the while brandishing firearms, drugging me and raping me again and again. He had a top plate of false teeth that he would dislocate in his mouth to make himself look like a monster, and then would chase me around his house, terrorizing me with fear to the point that I would wet myself, and then he would rape me again. There were many other psychological and physical tactics that held me hostage. I used to have night terrors of him adorned in a black cloak and mask with him, holding some sort of stick weapon, riding on the back of a Clydesdale horse. This figure would come out of nowhere and I would try to run, but this figure would always catch up to me and subdue me to the ground with this long stick or whatever it was, and I would look up and his base mask would really get close to my face with the distorted teeth protruding from the mask. I would wake myself up screaming. Later, when I saw Molly Hatchet's 1978 album cover Death Dealer by Frank Frazetta, I couldn't believe it and I can't explain it. That's what the figure in my nightmares looked like. I couldn't have any girlfriends because a couple of times that I did have them over, he would drug us and rape them too. While we were at the drive-in, I went to the bathroom And while I was gone, he held my best friend at knife point and forced her to perform fellatio. She also was terrified of him, and sadly to this day, she can't share that part of herself with her significant other. I figured out a way to discourage any other potential victims not to be my friend. The few times I did try to escape, he beat me up, threatened and or intimidated any potential rescuers. One day, as I was walking up the driveway, he shot at me. I shall never forget that sound. The bullets passed by the right side of my head, lifting my hair. Again, I wet myself, running for cover behind the vehicle. He started to laugh and yelled that they're not real bullets. I replaced the powder with candle wax. I was frozen with fear, and he started to approach the vehicle, and I collapsed into a fetal position, begging him not to kill me, sobbing. He was laughing so hard that he could barely show me the bullets were made of wax, as if that made a difference. Another time I tried, he dragged me by my hair, stripped me naked, and picked me up and slammed me in the bathtub, then stomped me with his boots under cold running water. I could go on, but I think I'll stop there. The time I was underage, he never ejaculated inside me. Rather, he pulled out just before ejaculation and let go on my skin in whichever position he had me in at the time, and joked with a sneer about how he can't get me pregnant because I'm prohibited by law. Once I turned 18, he got careless about it, and I got pregnant. When I told him I was pregnant, he insisted I get an abortion. Personally, I don't believe in abortion as a form of birth control, but my fear of him had me weeping on the couch with a Yellow Pages phone book, looking up abortion clinics while he went about his business around the house. I don't know where it came from, but if he was going to force me to kill this life growing inside me, then I was prepared to be killed by him. For the first time, I defied him. I slammed the book shut, threw it, got up off the couch, and stormed through the house looking for him, and found him and told him clearly as a matter of fact that I was going to have this baby. To my surprise, he didn't strike me, though. I shook inside, and I believed the way he looked at me, to his surprise as well, that I displayed for the first time unfamiliar courage, and he knew I meant it. I think this was the first time I had felt any power. Still, I was terrified of him. I didn't know if he would secretly poison me or have me killed by way of cutting the brakes on the vehicle, or have someone else kill me and my unborn child. My mind was reeling with ways in which I imagined our death. Nothing happened, and I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. I resigned myself that I would endure life suffering for the sake of this new life, and so with great difficulty, I tried to make a home. About a year and a half later, along with having pulling out before ejaculation rapes resume, I confided in someone, leaving out the whole scope of the dynamics about how when my child was old enough I would leave, and that someone must have unwittingly told my rapist my plan because he made sure that I got pregnant again. I conceived my second child while heavily sobbing and telling him to pull out, but he didn't. And the way he looked at me when he ejaculated inside me, he knew I would never get away. I learned that I would never trust anyone again. When it was confirmed that I was indeed pregnant with my second child, I told him his trick wouldn't work because I am getting an abortion. I told him I wanted him to feel defeated, even if it was for that moment. In that my plan to leave, so shall it be, no matter what. Of course, I would never get an abortion, and he knew that, but played like he saved his child from certain death. This would later be used in the course of events. So again, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy and told the doctor to perform tubal ligation. I started over in that when his child gets old enough, I shall leave. The rapes continued unbeknownst to anyone. We looked like a normal young family, and that's how I made it look. Still no friends, no education, no life to try to make a happy environment for my children. Sometimes under the influence of drugs or the residual effects of drugs that he used to control me. In my mind at the time, I didn't want my children to grow up without both their natural parents, no matter what he was. This was my life, at least until I could escape when the children were old enough. I was becoming something. I don't know if it was stronger, weaker acceptance of my fate, survival, or I just didn't care whether I lived or died. But whatever it was, compelled me to one day grab my then 1-year-old infant and started walking down a public street away from the rapist because I demanded no more drugs to be in the house around the children. I don't know where I thought I was going because I had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. I looked behind me and there was the rapist, crawling on his hands and knees with his right arm and hand extended, reaching out towards us, sobbing like a baby, telling me that we just need to leave the state and start new. Start new? What? Did he really believe that I wanted to be with him? He was talking about moving in with his mother and having a family, which I wanted for my children. And so I believed moving in with his mother would be safe for me and my children, and we all moved to New York. The drugging and rape stopped when we moved to his mother's house. That's what I hoped for. What a relief. Then things got weird. His mother was like jealous of me or something. One day, because I didn't have any socks of my own, I slipped a pair of my rapist socks on after she did the laundry, and she had a fit that I was wearing them. I was perplexed. I felt panic in that I knew something was wrong and that we were not going to get along. The knowing that eventually my rapist would take the children and move in the place of our own, in my mind, here comes the rape again. Well, what I'm thinking here is you're a rapist, or this guy obviously has some kind of sexual thing with his mother. That's where his sexual rapiness comes from and his aggressiveness comes from. He almost acts like a pimp. This is how pimps treat their prostitutes. And then when they think they're going to get away, when the beatings and the druggings don't work, that's when they start to the crawl tactics. It's like, you're the one I always loved, baby. Yada, yada, yada. This type of narcissist is nothing more than a pimp. So one night in the middle of a blizzard with excruciating heartfelt agony, I left my children with the rapist and his family and walked towards the highway to get a ride from someone to a Greyhound bus station about 35 miles away from the mother's house, and went back to California to get help to pursue remedy for this awful situation. I had no money and took only the clothes I was wearing. I didn't eat for 3 or 4 days that it took for the bus to get there. I stayed with my younger sister, whom was a new mother herself with her then boyfriend. I knew they were struggling, and yet they took me in. Both my sister and her boyfriend, the father of her children, were strung out on meth, and she was angry, and she was an angry, angry girl. Why shouldn't she be? I thought. No matter, I knew my sister had problems of her own, and I decided to go there. Hence, why didn't I go there before? And I believe she did try to help me, but she couldn't even help herself. And so she raged, and finally I had no place to go but back to New York a week later. I took the bus back to New York, vomiting and nauseous all the way, knowing that he had acquired a place for us away from his mother's house. I didn't know what would become of all this, but I knew I couldn't abandon my children. This would also be used later in the course of events. So when I got back, he was under the impression I went back to California to get my dad's buck knife and my blue photo album out of storage. I left the primary motive out, and that was the first night back. I fell asleep on the couch. Every time I doze off, I jolted myself back awake so that I would be aware, kind of like Nightmare on Elm Street, where if you fall asleep, you would end up dead. That's what it was like for a long time, until I realized he was leaving me alone. He never raped me again, but instead he started to plot my children against me. Yes, parental alienation. Didn't know the term at the time, while still in the home, if you want to call it a home. Not only that, but would grab my breasts in front of my children or go behind me and dry hump me in front of my children while looking at them, while they were looking at him at what he was doing. Oh yeah, he tricked me so long that I couldn't. Oh yeah, he also tickled me so long that I couldn't breathe and was in tears before he would stop and then tell the boys that he was just playing with mommy when he got scared for me. They eventually stopped being scared for me because they believed him and laughed along with him the next time it happened. I didn't have it in me to dispute that because I didn't want them to be scared, nor did I want them to feel guilt. My youngest son came home from Head Start with his teacher, and we were told that he destroyed another little boy's creation from blocks that my son had intentionally walked up to the stacked blocks and kicked and punched them for them to fall down. While the teacher was telling us this, my son grabbed her breast like he witnessed his father do to me. I was mortified, and she was shocked, of course. The rapist laughed, and so did my son. My eldest son had a speech impediment. He stuttered, which I believed was due to stress. My mind changed from, I don't want my children to grow up without both their natural parents, to no matter what he is, I have to get my children and myself out of here. So one day I waited for him to go to work. I called the battered women's shelter, and a woman picked us up, taking only our clothing, my camera, my blue photo album, and my dad's buck knife. Still, I never wanted my children to be without their natural father. I thought at the time, if I removed myself from him, that we could co-parent. Never in a million years did I think he would hurt the boys. Not understanding what I was dealing with at the time, I even told him we could do this without the court because we both love them and they both need us. And that wasn't good enough for him. His mother came to the shelter to pick up the boys for visiting. This was before any court proceedings, and I opened the door to her, holding her fists up, shaking them, with a very mean look on her face, as if she wanted to fist fight me. I didn't know what that meant. I just blew her off as her being mom and upset for that moment. Boy, was I wrong. I was 23 at the shelter, and I was due for my period, and it didn't come. I knew I wasn't pregnant. It was scary for me, but finally it came a month later. I learned years later that stress can cause that. We were at the shelter for about a month, then we got on welfare and food stamps and given a place of our own. Brand new beds to sleep in. Heck, it was our first meal we enjoyed sitting Indian style on the kitchen floor, using plastic spoons to scoop up wet cereal with powdered milk in paper bowls. At last, the beginning of a happy life, so I thought. While in our new home, my rapist shared, while in a new home of our own, my rapist and I shared the boys. When he come to pick them up, he brought with him diamonds, flowers, etc. He would propose marriage. Of course, I refused every time. I started classes at a community college to begin our new lives. One day he called as I just arrived home, and he told me that he got a good job that offered Blue Cross Blue Shield medical coverage for the boys, but the company wouldn't honor benefits unless he had paternity. This is where I fucked up. I gave him paternity under the guise the boys would have a better medical insurance. We were sharing the boys, and things seemed to be going as I wanted them to go, but they weren't going the way he wanted them to go. Soon as he got paternity, by knowing that I would do what I thought was best for the boys, he changed up and filed with the courts for custodial custody. His mother lived next to a retired judge for some for 30 some odd years, and they were friendly, and she knew a lot of the other people. The time came for her first court date, and we were appointed lawyers if we couldn't afford one. The lawyer we got was the best in the county for child custody. Perhaps this lawyer was not appointed at all, but hired, and if not hired, then appointed by way of his mother, having justice in the system. Either way, he got the bulldog, and I got the mouse. My first court-appointed lawyer had me write out everything that happened and deliver to his office. I remember thinking that finally I am free. We are free, and then he dropped me like a hot potato. I was confused. Only then did I get the mouse lawyer as the replacement, who, I might add, was arrested for cocaine shortly after the family court system re-victimized me and my children. I was accused of corporal punishment, abandoning my children, and wanting to abort my second child. I was on welfare and he had a job. I had no family and he did. I was not native to New York State and he was. The list goes on. Because I'm not a liar, I admitted that I was accused of was true and not being able to elaborate to tell my side of the story, which I believe they already had, and either didn't believe me and or his mother knew them somehow, convinced them I was lying, crazy, or something else. I will never know. I started crying, become very upset because the judge would not listen. The rapist stayed calm, yet another nail in our coffin. I lost control and he was in control, so they stole my boys from me and their mother, from them via judgment of joint custody, with him ruled as custodial parent. If memory serves me right, I believe spanking was not illegal in California at the time, and I believe it was in New York only because they had just passed the law. I didn't know that at the time, nor did I know I couldn't discipline spank my own children in any state. And then I couldn't believe that they changed it back again. Ignorance of the law. Wow, just wow. He spanked them as well in California, in New York, before we left him. Neither one of us beat them or anything, just a little swat on the fat of the thigh with an open hand to get their attention when needed is all. He absolutely made me out to be a child beater. He ran with that. I told my mouse lawyer that I wanted to appeal the judge's decision because I was not allowed to tell my story, and he said, let it go, like this is for a while and we'll go back in. Well, the rapist wasted no time. Child Protective Services were called for the slightest of things. Also, my new husband was accused of molesting my boys. I was accused of French kissing my youngest. I would go to their school and be involved and was treated like I was a danger to my children by the school staff, and other parents kept their distance while pointing and looking at me with uncertainty out while talking out of my earshot. The smear campaign goes on and on. The rapist's chest was getting bigger and bigger. He stalked me and by others and terrorized me. I got strange phone calls with the stranger saying, I see you. He'd then hang up, and other calls would be about what I was wearing that particular day or what he was doing, and hang up. The police wouldn't or couldn't, as they put it, do anything. I learned that if I didn't keep my mouth shut, that harm would come my way. I bought a gun, and so the downward spiral. The myriad of CPS reports were unfounded except for two. I told the truth whenever CPS interviewed me. On one occasion, after many unfounded reports, I admitted to spanking my boys for dodging cars in the middle of the street while we were residing at the battered women's shelter in New York. And the other time was even after more unfounded reports while I still had some sort of loving relationship with my boys. This happened after we were walking into my home during one of our last visitation weekends. I admitted to CPS to having a bullet in my catch-all dish on the coffee table. I saw my youngest pick up a bullet from the catch-all dish, mind you. This was happening while coats were being peeled off. At the same time, kisses and hugs were being exchanged. He had it for a nanosecond before I snagged it from his little hand and before he can even finish his question about what it was. I learned that the rapist called the police to inquire about how much force it would take for a bullet to blow up in someone's hand, as if he didn't know. Now, if I want to see my boys, they have to be supervised visits. And who gets to wear the supervisor's hat? Yep, the rapist. And where are these visits going to take place? Yep, in his arena. I went for the first I went and for the first time he molested me, and it got worse every time. So my alternative for not wanting to be molested was to have an hour a week with my boys at DSS. What a cold environment. Eventually the boys wanted to stop seeing me. Eventually they became afraid of me. All the while, unbeknownst to me at the time, I was being told years later by mutual people who witnessed the evil sperm donor smacking the boys upside the head hard and other physical and emotional abuse, not to mention whatever else was going on. I didn't know about at the time until my youngest told me a few years ago the other things, like my eldest son drawing pictures of me with a bloody knife plunged in my body. I asked my youngest, "And your father allowed that?" And my youngest replied, "Yeah," with pride. "Still, I don't know everything." My youngest son at 15 ran away from his abuse and came back to me. Within the first minutes of our reunion, he told me, "Dad told me you wanted to abort me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This evil creature told his son that. I burst into tears and saw the pain that this twisted information caused my son, and grabbed him and held him and told him it wasn't true, that I always loved him and I always wanted him. Then another statement was that I used to lock them up in a room so they can go out and drink and do drugs. Again, not true. I have been put on trial. Throughout my relationship with my youngest, he only knows the superficiality of what really happened because I'm afraid what the truth might do to his already broken psyche. Well, you're going to have to tell him. You're going to have to tell him at some point. You're going to have to get this story out there for everybody to see because it's important. There is so much more, as we all unfortunately know. In 2005, I went to the judge, and the two unfounded reports in my record were overturned and found to be unfounded. The judge must have read all the unfounded reports and whatever else available to him, and I was apologized to. What a joke. Damage done. On several occasions, I reached out to my eldest son, who is suffering, and I have been rejected every time. It has been a little over 2 years since I reached out, and his last response has kept me caged until about 3 months ago. I have written him about 4 letters with no response. About 6 weeks ago, he friend requested me on Facebook, and I accepted it. Still not a word. I imagine he wants to know me a bit or get comfortable, or stars forbid something sinister. I just don't know what to make of it. Update 6/26/15. My eldest son messaged me on Facebook with just one word. He replied, "Hi." One word, "Hey." I replied, "Hi." Nothing back yet. Cliche but true. If only I knew what I know now, I would have done things differently. I have great difficulty with the shame of not being stronger and smarter. The rapist died 2 years ago, and his mother years before that. Before he died, he called me. I think he got my number from my youngest son's phone book, and he told me that he was worried about my youngest, but not my eldest, and then asked for my forgiveness. I told him I shall never forgive you for hurting my boys. Being the mother of 2 adult sons, who we all suffer from parental alienation syndrome. My eldest son growing up, learning to hate me and being the golden child who is now reaching out to me. My youngest always loving me at the cost of being the scapegoat and the outsider because he refused to hate me, with both of them still loving their father, even in death. And me never seeming to know what is the right thing to do versus what is the wrong thing to do. And with all our heads so messed up already, I ask you this. Do you ever expose the truth to my boys? Thank you for you and your wife, or thank you and your wife for what you are both doing to help us all. Much respect. That's one of the most heart-wrenching, damaging things I've ever seen. And it all starts with the mother, where your mother at a very young age lets you believe that you were worthless to be defended sexually, to be stood up for, because her mother put her vagina before you, as did this guy you were with put his dick before you and his children and his own children. I said earlier in this video, I think your husband had some, this guy had some kind of sexual thing going on with his mother. That's where all this sexual aggressiveness, the drugs and all that comes from, in that control. You know, as far as the parental alienation, physically it's over. You know, the courts can't screw with you anymore with that. You have 2 adult sons. You owe it to your adult children of parental alienation to tell them the truth. That is why this channel exists. This channel started as a means for my daughter to go back and understand what I was going through and what I'm doing and reality and the true reality. They have to know your story. You owe it to them, because they don't understand what happened. They're only getting one side of it, and they may love their father, but their love of their father does not give that dude a free pass to get away with everything he's gotten away with. You owe it to your children, and you owe it to their well-being before things spiral out of control in their lives, because this is going to continue. You need to tell them that this guy drugged you, repeatedly raped you over and over and over again, because you don't know exactly, well, you kind of do know exactly what they've been exposed to and what this guy is capable of. Those boys need to know, or those men need to know, this can't happen, and you can't do these type of things to people. They will destroy you, because these two seem like they could be set up right on the road to continue the abuse on someone else, and this cycle needs to be stopped and broken. You owe it to your sons. As difficult as your story is, and as heart-wrenching as your story is, and as violating as your story is, as a mother, you can make up for the years that you lost with them, for the years of abuse, for their fucked up childhood, not because it was your fault at all. This is all at the hands of your abusers, not yours. Okay, because you were a young girl, you were 23 years old, and nobody helped you. And everybody knows here about the family courts, and we all have heard other people's stories of people with friends within the family court system. We know it's a fucking scam. We know it's a cabal. We know nepotism goes on, and we know backbiting goes on in there, and it's an unfair system. Your sons are reaching out to you now, okay? Take it slow, take the opportunity, okay? Don't try to rush it, okay? Work it slow, bring them back in, but eventually they're going to have to know your truth. They're going to have to know your reality. You owe it to yourself. First and foremost, you owe it to yourself to get your story out there, to stop living like this, to stop living under this guilt and this shame, because you should have been protected by your mother years ago, and you would have understood, okay, to stand up for your own body and to stand up for yourself. But your mother stole that from you by letting this guy around you, okay, thinking 3 months after your dad died, thinking that, you know, putting her own fucking pussy above her own daughter. And that's where this all started. This is why you were allowed to be abused for so long. You have a very good, you write very well. You're obviously you're obviously a very bright person. You have a lot to offer here. Okay, your story can help. You should really consider doing a YouTube channel on your own. Okay, and hopefully that'll help your sons understand their childhood and understand how they were raised was wrong. And hopefully that will keep them from picking up some of these same tactics that, you know, your sperm donor, that you call them, used, because you're, unfortunately, your sons are very susceptible to these tactics as well. Thank you for your courage in sending me this. I really do appreciate it. It took a lot of courage and a lot of balls to do this, so thank you. And you know, you do deserve credit for this. Sorry for the length of the video, but you know, it's a long story. I'm glad I read it. I'm glad I read it cold. I really didn't break in with my commentary because this story was so compelling and captivating. So thank you. So thank you for it. I hope some other people can put in their input as well, share their stories, because getting these stories out there and getting this abuse out there is going to expose the narcissist, and it makes it harder and harder for these type of things to happen. But again, you do owe it to your son to tell them the truth. Whether they accept that truth or not is another story, but you can't die. You can't move on without this truth being said. Oh, and one other thing interesting that you said about him asking for forgiveness at the end. You know, Virginia did the same thing, my narcissistic grandmother to my mother. And it seems like right on death's door, they will sometimes ask for forgiveness, tell you you're a good person, and then fuck you over in the will anyway. But, you know, who cares? We already know what the story is with that. So, thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you enjoy this channel, if you like this channel, if you're getting something out of this channel, please consider donating to the GoFundMe link in the description box. Obviously, you don't have to donate for me to read your story, but if you do go right to the top of the list, and I'll make an immediate video. But as this one proves, you know, this is somebody living in a desert, in a broken down camper, okay? And, you know, you don't need to contribute for me to read your story, but, you know, if you do, you'll go right to the top of the list. Even sharing the link helps as well. Thank you all again for watching. This is Ollie Matthews. I'll see you all again soon.